Okay, today we are picking up with the powers of Congress. Now, the most important power that Congress has is the ability to make laws. They tell us what we can and what we cannot do, but they have multiple other powers as well. So, some of the powers that are granted to Congress by the Constitution include, number one, financing our government. That just means that they have the ability to raise and collect taxes. They can borrow money, they can print money. There's a lot of different things that they're able to do with money. The second is to regulate trade, and they can regulate trade with the states. They can regulate trade with foreign countries, so they have a lot of control in that. They're able to set weights and measures so that a bushel of stuff in Iowa is the same as a bushel of stuff in Alaska or a bushel of stuff in Florida, so that it's the same weight or the same measure. They also set punishments for crimes that happen on the sea. The third is that they help to defend the nation, and they do that by maintaining our military, our armed forces, and having them ready and prepared to defend us. The fourth is to enforce laws, and when we look at enforcing laws, they're looking at how to better protect us. And so they are passing laws against counterfeiting, which is creating fake money, and against treason. And treason is an act that betrays our country, that can endanger our country. The fifth power they have is to provide for growth, and this can include not only with our population but our actual land itself. They govern our territories, they allow for the admission of new states to our country, they regulate immigration, they pass laws about how you become a citizen, so naturalization laws. So there's a lot of things that they are dealing with in that. Now, it's interesting because these are the powers that are granted to them in the Constitution, but it's not necessarily written in the Constitution that they are able to do all this stuff. What this comes from is the Elastic Clause. Now, the Elastic Clause is just a nickname for it. It's actually called the Necessary and Proper Clause, but the Elastic Clause does a lot better job of describing what it does. Now, the Necessary and Proper Clause says that Congress can make laws that are necessary and proper for carrying out the powers that we just talked about. But it's called the Elastic Clause because basically what this means is that they're able to stretch those powers to include a lot of different things that aren't mentioned in the Constitution. And so these are called implied powers, that these are claims that are made about Congress through the Elastic Clause that have been stretched. A great example would be regulating trade. The Constitution just says that Congress can regulate trade, but Congress has interpreted that to mean, or has implied, that that means that they can create like a highway system, because a highway system helps out our trade. It makes getting trade from one state to another easier. So that makes sense. So it doesn't say creating highways in the Constitution, but it's implied that if you're regulating trade, that would be something. Transportation would be something that you would be naturally concerned with. So other things that Congress has power to do, they have the power to impeach. And impeaching just means that you have the power to accuse officials of a crime and bring them to trial. Typically, it's on a case of treason, that they are betraying or endangering our country. So each part of Congress has a separate job in impeachment. The House of Representatives is the one that draws up the charges. So they're the ones that decide, you have committed a crime, so we're going to accuse you of the crime. So they actually are the ones that they decide if they're going to have a trial or not. The Senate is the one that actually conducts the trial. So if the House decides that you're going to trial, you are then impeached. If the Senate, when they conduct the trial, finds you guilty, you are fired. So there's a lot of cases where you are impeached, but you don't actually lose your job. Because if you're not found guilty, if you are found innocent, then you don't lose your job. You've just been impeached. So it seems like impeached is a bad thing, or that it's the end of the road or the worst thing that can happen, but it actually isn't. We've had several officials that have been impeached but have not actually lost their jobs. So special powers that the House and the Senate have. The House, like I said, has the ability to start the impeachment proceedings. They also start any bills that are going to spend money have to start in the House. And they also have a power that they've never used, and that's if there's ever a three-way tie for the president, they get to decide the winning vote. They get to make the decision of the three who's going to win. It's never been used, but they do have that ability. It's in the Constitution. The Senate has special powers as well. Like I said, they are the ones that conduct the trials for the impeachment. They also give approval for a lot of things. So, like treaties with foreign countries, the Senate has to give its approval. Certain officials that are appointed by the president, like cabinet members or Supreme Court justices, they have to be approved by the Senate. So it's not like the president can just say, oh, I like this person, this is who's going to be. They have to actually go through a process and be approved for it. Now, with all of these powers, Congress is not all powerful. They do have certain limitations on their powers, and we're going to talk about 9 of the limitations on their powers. The first is that if the Supreme Court finds anything that they do or any law that they pass to be unconstitutional, then they can't do it. If they go beyond their powers, it's unconstitutional and they can't pass that law. The second is they cannot pass ex post facto laws, and ex post facto is Latin for after the fact. So, for example, you can't get in trouble for something that was done before it became a law. A great example of this would be here in Iowa. We have murderers, but we don't have the death penalty. So in Iowa, if you commit murder, you're going to go to life to prison for life, but you're not going to have the death penalty. Now, if next year we decide to have the death penalty, does that mean everybody that is in prison for murder is going to be executed? Well, that wasn't the law when they actually were found guilty. So we can't punish them for a crime that they committed before the law became law. So hopefully that makes sense. The third is that Congress cannot pass bills of attainders. And a bill of attainder means that you can't sentence a person to jail before they've had their trial. So you can't put somebody in jail and say, you got to sit there for 30 years without giving them a trial. So that's a big no-no. The fourth is that they cannot suspend the writ of habeas corpus. And habeas corpus just means that the person accused of the crime has to have evidence against them before they can be accused, before they can be put on trial. You can't just, if there's a crime committed, you can't just find somebody that, you look like you probably did it, or you were in the area at the time, so you must have done it. You have to have some sort of evidence to actually back up your theory. The fifth is they cannot tax exports. They cannot tax exports. Exports are things that we send out of our country. They can tax imports, things that we bring into our country, but they cannot tax exports because there's a fear that they may be one-sided, that certain areas export a lot more than they import, and so that would hurt their economy. The sixth is that they cannot violate the Bill of Rights, so protecting all of your Bill of Rights freedoms. The seventh is that they cannot favor the trade of one state over another. And what this means is that since Washington, D.C. is close to like Virginia and Maryland, they can't just look at those two states to provide their things. So, for example, let's say the congressional building, Congress, needs to get new toilets in their bathrooms. So you're going to hire somebody to replace them. They can't just say, oh, we're going to go with this local company, because you're favoring the trade of Virginia over all the other states. So instead, what they have to do is they have to send out a bid to other companies around the nation and say, okay, anybody else want to build our toilets for us? So it gives those other states the ability to say, yeah, we want that trade. We want that boost to our economy. Number 8, they are not given titles of nobility. So we don't call them Sir Martin or Lord King or anything like that. Everybody is considered equal. The 9th is that they cannot withdraw any money from the nation's account without passing a law first. So they have to set a budget and they got to figure out, okay, where are we going to spend our money at? How much are we going to spend? So they have to actually think about it before they actually begin doing anything. Some other roles that our Congress has, in addition to all these other things, number 1, they help their constituents. And constituents are the people that they represent in their home states. So the people from their own state, they try to listen to their ideas, they listen to their problems, they try to bring money to the state, try to boost the economy, all kinds of stuff. The second is that they conduct investigations. And usually those investigations are about national issues. So, for example, when 9/11 happened, we had investigations conducted by Congress to look at what was our federal response to these terror attacks. What can we do to stop it from happening again? Another example would be like when Hurricane Katrina hit. They are looking at what was the federal government's response and how can we fix that. So, we've done a lot of talking about bills. Now, are they actually passed? Well, a bill becomes a law, and a bill is a proposed law. So, a bill doesn't automatically become a law. And bills can begin in either house, with the exception of money. Money has to start in the House of Representatives, but any other law can be proposed any other way. A lot of ideas come from citizens. They come from the president. They come from congressional members themselves. So there's a lot, or organized groups can even. So there's a lot of different ways that ideas come in. But these ideas become a bill, and only members of Congress can actually suggest the bill. They're the only ones who can submit it. But they get these ideas from other places. And the bill is introduced, and we're going to say in the House of Representatives first, just because that'll make things easier. So the bill is introduced in the House of Representatives, and it's going to be dropped into the hopper. And the hopper is a box on the clerk's desk. And the clerk is going to type it up, and they assign it a letter, and they assign it a number just for identification purposes. And so in the House, it would be called H.R. 1. And when it gets to the Senate, it'll be called S1. So it tells us, what bill it is and gives us a letter to identify us if it's in the House or in the Senate. Then they send it to committee. And committees, remember, are the ones that kind of look through things. So the bill is sent to the committee, and the committee determines, okay, is this a good thing or not? And then they decide, well, maybe we need to hold a hearing on it. Maybe we need to open it up to the public and see what the public thinks about this. Or maybe we need to gather some more evidence or get people's testimonies. So they do all of those things in order to get more information. So the committee studies the bill. They may decide to rewrite parts of it, and then the committee holds a vote, and the majority decide, okay, maybe we need to bring it to the entire House now. So then the House is going to consider the bill, and it's placed on the House calendar for discussion so that they know what's coming up. They put it on the calendar, and they give it 3 readings. And in the reading, the Speaker of the House is going to read the title, and then they put it into debate. They decide how much time they're going to spend on the debate. They do a voice vote, and if they decide, well, we're kind of close, or it's definitely not going to pass, we're just not going to spend more time on it. If it is a major bill, then they will actually do a roll call vote. So they vote on it. And in a roll call vote, the name is called, and somebody records down how they actually voted, so that the public knows who voted what on which bill. So then if they get a majority and it passes on to the next House, and the next House is the Senate. And the Senate does the same exact process as the House. They send it to committee and all that kind of stuff. The only difference in the Senate is that they don't have a time limit like they do in the House. In the House, they have a time limit because there's 435 members. And if you didn't have a time limit, you could spend all day talking about one minor thing. So in the Senate, there's only 100 members. So they don't have a time limit on their debate. And sometimes they can have something called a filibuster. And a filibuster is where they try and talk it to death so that people get just so bored of hearing it that they just decide we're not going to vote for it, or they leave before there's a vote. Now, the House and the Senate, eventually, if they can, they will agree on a final bill, and then they send it to the president. And the president can do 3 things. He can veto it, and a veto just means that he refuses to pass this bill. Or he can sign it, and then it becomes law. Or if he wants to kind of take a way out without getting in trouble sort of thing, he can keep it for 10 days and not sign it. He's not going to sign it and pass it, but he's not going to veto it either. And if he keeps it on his desk for 10 days and just kind of ignores it, it becomes law if Congress is in session. He just hasn't signed it. But if he keeps it and Congress goes out of session, it is vetoed, and it's called a pocket veto, because he didn't actually veto it. It just kind of happened because of a loophole. So he can sign it, he can veto it, or he can wait for it to be pocket vetoed. So that's what happens as a bill becomes a law.